Hello guys, it is Gate of Theories here, and Riverdale is finally back after Christmas, so we here at Gate of Theories are of course going to cover everything that we can, and of course what we've been doing recently is trying to work out what is going to happen at the end of the season. Because all the way since the end of Season 3, that cliffhanger that happened with Betty and Archie and Veronica by the fire, we've all been wondering what's going to happen in the spring break time at the end of Season 4 of Riverdale, because clearly something huge is going to happen, because throughout all of Season 4 and at the end of Season 3, they've been flash forwarding little glimpses of what is going to happen at the end of the season. But the only problem is with these glimpses is that they're not really showing us them in order, because I really doubt they're showing us them in order. I think originally we might have thought, well, we probably hoped that all of these future glimpses that we're seeing at the end of each episode is running chronologically in parallel to the episodes that we're actually seeing happen in the present day, except for this is Riverdale, so we know of course that is not happening. So I thought today, let's try and work out as much as we can about this season finale that is going to happen. Of course, it's going to involve all the characters, especially Jughead, as all of these glimpses seem to be surrounding Jughead and Betty's relationship, as well as Jughead maybe dying. And of course, we're all going to be really sad about that. So in today's video, we're going to collect every single one that we've had of these little future glimpses and see if we can put them in some sort of chronological order so that we can find out exactly what is going to happen at the end of Riverdale Season 4, and then we don't have to worry, and then we can just, if it's a good outcome, we can be excited for it, and if it's a bad outcome, then we can dread it coming in case they do actually kill Jughead. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Okay, so I think the best way to tackle this situation is to look back at every single clip that we've had so far that is basically a glimpse into what's going to happen into this season finale. Then we're going to have to look back at every single one and run through what we know about each of them. So let's travel all the way back to the Season 3 finale, where we saw Betty, Veronica, and Archie all by a fire, covered in blood. Now, Betty is the only main one who talks in this scene, and she is extremely serious. Now, of course, back then, we don't really know why she's being so serious. Of course, now we might know a slight bit more, but I'll come back to that later. And we can tell she's being really serious because we don't usually see Betty this tense, and then she even snaps to Archie like, "Archie, please listen to me." So she is really serious, and again, we'll come on to maybe why she might be serious later on. And she basically says that they cannot tell anyone about whatever this thing is. They have to burn Jughead's beanie and go their separate ways and never speak of it. And of course, we see them with Jughead's beanie, and yet Jughead is nowhere to be seen. And then it goes back to the present day. And then Season 4 came around, first episode, we didn't really have much because of course it was dedicated to Luke Perry, but then the second episode came around and we saw a wood with everyone searching for Jughead, and that is basically the start of where we started to see what all of these glimpses were going to be about. Each glimpse always relates to something to do with Jughead, which is why people have assumed that the finale of Season 4 is all going to be surrounded around the character Jughead, which I'm not complaining about because Jughead is one of the best characters. And we've done a theory in the past about some of these earlier clips to do with whether Jughead might die in the series, and if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go and check it out, and there will be a link up there in the cards, or there will be a link down below in the description if you want to go and check that video out. But it basically just explains what some of these earlier clips are about and how they hint to maybe Jughead dying and maybe how Jughead dies. Okay, and then we see the wood, of course, with lots and lots of people all searching. We've got FP searching, we've got Betty, Veronica, Archie, we've got Cheryl, we've got Tony, we've got Kevin, and we've got all of these people searching for Jughead in this forest. There's just a huge army all searching for Jughead, so clearly something's up. And then later on, we see Betty and FP by Jughead, who has, well, we assumed died in the hospital, and they look at the body that they found, and it is Jughead, and they're a bit worried. We're not sure whether he is dead, but we're assuming that he is. And then we see FP come into the classroom saying Archie, Veronica, and Betty are being arrested for the murder of his son, Jughead Jones. And this scene has always sort of like, it was the peak moment of where everyone who was a fan of Riverdale just lost their minds because it was confirmed, well, we assume that Jughead is going to die in the future. And the thing that really got me about this scene is that no one seems shocked whatsoever. Everyone just seems like it's just a normal day. Like, this is Riverdale. Like, I know things aren't that normal, but clearly you'd be a bit worried if some of your best friends have just killed your other best friend. But anyway, well, that's been explained in another video if you want to go and check it out. But then we see Archie, Veronica, and Betty basically be taken by FP. And now we move on to another episode where we see Jughead and Betty getting closer and closer to solving another mystery. And then Betty says, "That's what I'm worried about." And we get our next glimpse into the future. And it's Betty, Veronica, and Archie. They all line up for police inspection, and FP is with Donna and Brett from Jughead's new school. And Donna and Brett say these three are the ones who killed Jughead, and they are really serious about it, kind of look a bit worried about it, and it was just a really creepy scene to watch. And I think it's sort of leading and trying to make the audience think that maybe Archie, Betty, and Veronica did kill Jughead. And then we move on, and we get probably the most horrific glimpse into the future of all of them. And this was the glimpse after the entire episode Tangerine, and it was all revolved around Dark Betty, and of course Betty throwing her stone on her cat, all revolving around that. And in the flash forward scene, we see Archie find Jughead dead in the wood with Betty and blood all over her hands, with what looks like a rock in her hands that she used to kill Jughead. And that got fans even more freaked out by maybe Bughead's over and maybe Betty has now killed Jughead, and that just got everyone crazy about it. And if you want to go and check a video on that about why Betty might have killed Jughead, you can also go and check that out. There'll be a link down below in the description, or you can go and click the card right now. So it basically, all these glimpses got lots and lots of people worried about maybe Betty even kills Jughead, and it's just got us even more confused to the things that we already knew about. And then we of course had the Christmas break, and then we came back, and there was a scene that says it takes place 1 month later, where it shows Betty packing up Jughead's things. Now Brett comes in and says, "I guess you got what you wanted. Jughead isn't going to Yale now, so I guess it'll just be me and you in New Haven." So this kind of suggests that maybe Betty has taken Jughead's place. After all, she wanted to go to Yale in the first place, and this whole episode was revolved around Jughead getting into Yale, so maybe Betty got a bit jealous. But anyway, we're not really sure much about this scene. And then finally we get to the most recent episode, where we get a scene taking place in the present where Jughead and Brett are planning a fight, and then we see Betty crying in Pops with Archie in the future glimpse, and she tells him that she can't wait any longer for Jughead to return, and Archie says, "We'll get through this." So that's loads and loads of information, and of course you can tell it's definitely not in the right order. It's Riverdale trying to trick us, trying to tease us about certain things, and probably all of what we know is probably not going to happen. So I think to make most sense of this, we're going to try and fit it into what we think a chronological order will be like. And then it's not that long till the Riverdale season finale, so very soon we'll be able to find out lots more about whether we got this order right, and maybe it'll tell us a glimpse about what might actually happen in the season finale. So let's try putting all of this in order. So first of all, where the hell do we actually start with all this? Because as I was saying, all of this is in a completely random order, so we're just going to have to go with what we think we know. And the first thing I noticed when I put all of these scenes in order of when they came out, the scene where FP comes in to arrest Betty, Veronica, and Archie, we can see the clothes that all three of them are wearing in the classroom, and then later on, when they're in the police inspection, we know that this scene will take place straight after, as they are wearing the same clothes, and now instead of being in school, they're doing what FP has told them to do, and they're at the police station. So there we go, we've got our first link. So we've got the biology class linking to the scene straight after, and this will happen straight after, as they're wearing the same clothes, it will happen in the same day. They instantly go straight to the police station. So there's two scenes instantly linked. Now, the rest is a bit confusing. How on earth are we going to link? And then I thought, let's have a look at all of the scenes that take place in like a dark atmosphere. So that is the fire scene that we got at the end of season 3, the wood scene, and the scene where we see Betty might have killed Jughead. And all of these things have one thing in common. They've got the darkness, it's definitely night in all of them, and they all seem to be taking place in a wood. Perfect. Now, from this, we can basically build what we think how this time in the wood is going to take place, because in two of the scenes, Betty, Veronica, Jughead, and Archie are all alone. And then in another one of the scenes, they're with lots of people, with what I'm going to call Jughead's army to go and find him. So that means that the wood scene will go first, as we see all of the people searching, including FP. We've got like a whole army of Riverdale just searching for Jughead in the wood. And then something must happen that separates the main gang from everyone else, because then in these next two scenes that we've got, the fire clip and the one where Betty might have killed Jughead, we see that the gang are all just alone and it's just the four of them. And then we can just do it by process of elimination, because since the fire scene doesn't have Jughead in, we can assume that he's dead because they're all covered in blood and there's a fire and they have Jughead's beanie, which means that I reckoning the scene that goes after the wood scene where it's all the army, it is the scene where Jughead might have been killed by Betty, because they're all alone, so maybe Betty doesn't seem to know what she's doing and Archie seems really surprised, so maybe Betty went off to find Jughead in another direction, ended up finding Jughead, might have killed him, we don't know yet. And then Archie and Veronica have to go off and search for Betty, so they separate from the original group. They find Betty, and as we've seen from the clip, Archie looks really shocked, like sees Jughead dead on the floor and is like, "Oh Betty, what have you done?" That's a bit creepy. And then it would explain why, if the next scene is the fire scene, why they're all so worried, because they've realised, hang on a minute, Archie and Veronica are now part of this crime scene as well. There's a whole army out in the woods looking for them. So of course they're going to have to burn all the evidence, including Jughead's beanie hat, as they're saying. And it explains why on earth Betty is being so serious in this scene, and why she's being like, Archie, stop, you need to listen to me. We need to go our separate ways and never talk about this ever again. Because they're all in this crime scene that's happened in this wood, and they realise they've got to do this quickly, and they've got to burn all their clothes and run away, because right now Jughead's army in the woods might be coming to find them. So we've got two separate scenes now. We have the whole wood scene, and we've got that order, and then we have the whole biology class and police scene and getting taken over. So there's got to be one thing that links these two together, which was pretty obvious, and that was the scene where we've got Jughead in the hospital room with FP and Betty, because we know that from this scene, Jughead has been hit with whatever has been hit with, and he must have been found from somewhere, most likely the woods, so we can say that this scene takes place after all the wood scene. And then, of course, Betty's with them because, of course, they don't know that Betty's done it, which means that the next few scenes must be the biology class, because they've now worked out that Betty has done it. So there's still there'll be a gap between these two scenes. We just don't know what yet. But we know that now FP has found it, so they will go off and find the biology class. So already, we've basically linked almost every single one, apart from the latest two that we've actually got. So the order would go the wood, and then the scene where Betty is about to kill Jughead, then the bonfire scene, then the scene in the hospital room, then the biology class, and then the police station. Which means the only two left is we have the one that says 1 month later, which is where Betty is packing up all of Jughead's stuff, and we get the one, our most recent one to the present day, where Betty and Archie are in Pops and they're a bit worried. And from the dialogue that's said in these two scenes, we can basically tell where in this timeline they'd go. Let's start with the most recent one that we've got, with Betty in Pops, and she says to Archie, "Where is Jughead? I can't keep on waiting this long," which must mean that something that we don't know what's happened yet. The Jughead is obviously missing and has told Betty that he will return, and yet he's not came back and Betty's struggling, which means this must have to take place straight at the beginning, so before all the wood scene, and it would make sense because from this scene we found out that Jughead's obviously left and he's told Betty and Archie that he will come back, but clearly he's not came back yet, which enrolls them to want to make the search in the woods, and then it will happen like that, which means that so that must go at the beginning, which means that the final one is the one where Betty's packing up all of Jughead's things, which I'd say most likely, since what Brett has said, being like, oh, you got away with this, most likely takes place at the very end after all of this has happened, and I don't know, maybe Betty's won. I mean, clearly she must be going to Yale now. So now we have the full timeline from these future glimpses, and it goes in the order as follows. It goes the scene with Betty and Archie and in Pops, and they're waiting for Jughead to return. We still don't know why Jughead's missing, but clearly he's told Betty that he's going to return, and he hasn't yet. Then Betty enrolls a search patrol with FP, and everyone searches in the woods, and they're searching for Jughead, but then Betty goes off, so Archie and Veronica try and find her. Archie finds Jughead with Betty, and it looks like Betty has killed Jughead, and everyone's so shocked, including Betty herself. Clearly Dark Betty must have came out, and it means that now they're all part of this crime scene. If they're caught, they're going to be arrested. So they have to start burning their entire clothes. They have to burn Jughead's beanie, and they basically have to say, we can't speak of this, we have to go our separate ways, and we're never going to speak of this ever again. And then Jughead's body is recovered by FP's team in the hospital, so FP brings Betty in, and they both see Jughead is, what we assume, dead. And then FP clearly finds out from Brett and Donna that it was Archie, Betty and Veronica who might have killed Jughead, so he comes in, takes them out of their biology class, brings them to the police station, makes sure it's definitely them, and then something must happen which makes Betty end up going to Yale and packing up Jughead's things. It's a crazy chronological timeline, and I'm not gonna lie, I hope that this is actually gonna happen, because it looks like a really cool story, and it's not that long, because in 4 weeks from now, because our last episode we got 4 weeks later, which, if our chronological timeline is correct, the most recent future glimpse that we got is actually like the first one of these glimpses, and it says it's 4 weeks from now. Then if we count to our 4th week, we actually have the name for the 4th episode that's coming 4 weeks later, which is called To Die For. So clearly that must be referencing something to do with Jughead maybe gone missing, maybe people assuming that he's dead. And honestly, if this is the timeline, I cannot wait. So guys, that's the end of this crazy video. Guys, I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, make sure that you smash that like button down below and subscribe so you don't miss any other Riverdale videos with those notification bell on. And if you want to go and see any of our other Riverdale theories about maybe why Betty might have killed Jughead, or maybe how Jughead might have died, then again, those videos are down below in the description. Make sure you tell us in the field section down below if you think we've got this order right, or if you think any tweaks could be made. I think the only tweak that I'd ever make, if I had to make one, would be the final one where Betty is unpacking Jughead's things and basically about to go off to Yale. That could take place before the biology class scene because of the way Brett acts, and then Brett tells FP after that, and then the biology class scene happens. But then again, it could happen the way that we've said it happens in this video, but I'll leave that up to you guys. Make sure you leave all your thoughts down below about what you think might happen in the episode, and as always, we've been here on Gated Theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.